Hello and welcome to another episode of the SEO Unplugged podcast. I'm your host, Itamar Blauer. Today, I'm joined with Otso Karvinen, who is the lead marketing strategist at Quru. Otso, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's been a while since we've talked like this. We've talked a lot on LinkedIn, but not like this. So
That is true, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you. And something that is really cool to talk about today, that's why I want to save this topic and speak to you about it specifically, is about search personalization. And I think this topic is super fascinating, and some of the stuff that we'll probably get into today maybe might make people think, how come this wasn't the case 3 years ago or something
mm,
like that? But there's a lot to talk about. And the first thing that I want to discuss was patents. So you put
yeah.
a post up on LinkedIn not too long ago about a patent that Google has had around search personalization. So could you give us a bit of a rundown in terms of what you found?
Yeah. I think it was. I saw some article about it, and then I did a little bit of digging myself. So it was a patent around search personalization, and it had been around for a while. So there had been quite many iterations of the patent itself, and it dealt with personalizing the search results based on your like search history, location, all that stuff. That's of course we know that has been there for quite a long time, but now this newest version included some language that really sounded very much like AI coded to me, or kind of like AI driven. So basically, the difference between the latest versions, the two latest versions, was that the newest version, it included things like that the results were developing while you are talking, or while you are having kind of like the discussion, or while you are searching, and then kind of adapting to that. So I think that was a really kind of interesting way, and just that they have also updated now that patent. So that's very kind of interesting to me. It really felt like, and I put in the LinkedIn post as well, is like this is kind of a hint as towards where Google is also driving the search personalization as well.
hmm Yeah, and because if you consider the amount of data that Google has on individuals, on users, especially, if you have a Google account, right? And that data that Google has had for decades at this point, it's one of those things where you think to yourself, well, within the traditional SERP, where you put in a query, you get some results, at least from my perspective, I was sort of thinking, well, Google has so much information about all of us that it could have just been able to personalize the results anyway. Like it already does so based on location. So like you'll get
Yeah.
localized results typically when you search for stuff. But when it comes to more of like the maybe the frequency of what you search for in particular times of the day or the week, and I'm sure Google has that knowledge and that data stored, but it's the case where maybe now with this pattern that's been updated, it could be one where, like you're saying, if the information is continuously updating in sort of real time as you're searching, then that could be something that for sure is going to be impactful and providing a better search experience for users. But then I guess the question is, how is that going to be implemented? Is that going to be just
Yeah.
within the SERPs as we know them, or is it going to be purely from an AI overviews or the AI mode or things like that? So, is there anything to sort of suggest how they might go about at deploying this stuff?
Not from the patent, I don't think. I think the search personalization is it's a really interesting topic, because I actually did a quick survey of people I know that, like, a lot of people don't actually know that the search, like, you can even turn off the personalization. Like if you scroll down all the way to the bottom of your search results page, you can just click on like show me unpersonalized results. And I was testing a few things that I know that I've been searching lately, and I know that are kind of relevant in my like previous search history and location and stuff like that. And I found that it's very subtle. It's very small differences in terms of what comes up in the searches. Of course, it might differ from case by case, but this I don't really see from the actual patent that there's any suggestion as to where it would be implemented. My best guess right now is the AI overviews, or whatever is the kind of heavily Gen AI driven search experience that Google is developing. Because of course it's a patent, so it might be something that they are planning to implement later on. I was toying around with the idea is that Google would launch some kind of like a Gemini search experience to kind of battle with the ChatGPT search. I know that you posted about the topic and have discussed that topic before, like what is the Gen AI search kind of happening and how is that influencing the search landscape. But to me, I think that's kind of my best guess right now is that either AI overviews, some kind of thing there, or then something completely different like a Gemini search experience.
Yeah, because I suppose, at the end of the day, it's just a pattern, as you say. I mean, like Google's got God knows how many patents over the
Yeah,
years, right? And it's like some of it is utilized, some of it isn't. But at least the patents do demonstrate a level of intent and sort of like at least the awareness from Google's perspective, which is
yeah,
kind of what you A would expect, but B, it's something that you sort of want to see in terms of Google as the behemoth it is to not fall behind to what we've seen from OpenAI. Because I think this is where the sort of conversation gets quite interesting because OpenAI has not been around for nearly as long as Google has. And when you look into the way that OpenAI with ChatGPT and how it's been able to utilize your previous conversations with it to really personalize and bring back different bits from stuff that even if you've mentioned it, months ago, it
yeah,
still has built up its sort of picture about you and is able to provide recommendations based on things that you have mentioned beforehand or considerations that it can give you. So, with that in mind, seemingly well, I don't want to say simple, but if you think in terms of timelines, it was a
yeah,
very quick thing, relatively speaking, for ChatGPT to have in its arsenal.
yeah.
So, what's the deal there? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's an amazing question. I think it's a really relevant question. To me, I have been kind of considering this as what has been driving the development of Google search. And to me, it has been Google Ads. It has been advertising. So basically that is bulk of Google's revenue. And I think that has been the thing that is actually driving some of the development and the decisions around, for example, personalization. So it could be that the commercial kind of intent behind search has been so heavily driven by ads that it's actually hindered the development of kind of personalized search results. But it's kind of hard to know why it has been. I think one, it's a completely different kind of beast altogether. Of course, like the large language models. I was going through the kind of history of personalization. Actually, used AI to kind of paint the picture, paint the picture of the kind of full history of AI personalization, not AI personalization, but search personalization. I think this was kind of relatively quickly the ChatGPT and the Gen AI after kind of Google's kind of the big things that Google put out, like Bird and Mom, for example. Those were not too long ago. Like I started in Quru in my current company, and basically Mom was just kind of coming out then. So it's kind of in that time scale, it's kind of quick. Of course, there's a long history with Google like doing personalization. I think personalization for search started in 2004. I think looking at, and then 2009 or something, it was implemented to everybody using search. But I think in that time scale, it's not that quickly that like the Gen AI has been a part of, or the large language models have been a part of search. So in that sense, it's a different kind of game. But to the first point and to the first question, I think one of the key things is advertisement, and whatever benefits advertisement the most will influence the search like as a whole, because that is still bulk of Google's revenue.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that also ties into traffic, right? So
Yeah,
if, for example, ChatGPT is providing such a great experience that it's diverting a lot of user attention away from Google to ChatGPT, then from Google's perspective, that's going to influence ads because if less people are using Google, there's less people to click on ads, and therefore less revenue for Google. So, with that said, what do you think it is that Google realistically needs to do to kind of at least further cement its mark, at least in terms of the search personalization conversation, which at this moment in time, it's without question that ChatGPT is doing that a lot better?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the problem is that it would, from me at least, what I think the problem is that search would have to look very different than it is right now, like Google search, like ChatGPT, using that as a search engine, or Perplexity or Gemini or anything else. It's a very different experience. Like you said, that the level of personalization, just the way that the tools actually learn from what you are asking and learn about you, that's one thing. But actually, you have full control over, like, you can give the instructions, like, this is the context that I am kind of working with, and these are things that are important. You can give it a lot more context. So Google is kind of, in that sense, playing with less data. I think when it comes to, they are kind of pulling that information from different places, but actually the user can give all the kind of intent themselves for them. But I think for Google, I think the problem is that it would have to look so different, and for them to do such a drastic change to Google search would kind of jeopardize the ads, the kind of moneymaker there. So I think they have to be super careful as to what kind of changes they do. Like, I think the um, search generative experience or the AI overviews, I think it's a perfect example of, they were trying to be quick, and it kind of really backfired on them for at least a while. Like, we have, probably everybody listening has read the horror stories of all those really, really good and helpful responses that we got from the AI overview. So I think it's a problem of, they are now having to compete really quickly. So they are kind of, they can't do it the way that they would want to. So I think that's one kind of key issue.
Yeah, and I guess maybe something else that maybe not many people are discussing is really how people have been conditioned to use Google in terms of what people actually do when they're on Google. And the differences of how people have been conditioned to use ChatGPT, where it's very different in terms of the actual inputs that you're providing. So
Yeah.
Google historically has always been something for getting very quick answers to very short and sort of prompt types of input. So like if you're looking for a new computer, you might put a computer and then some kind of graphics card, for example.
Yeah.
Whereas on ChatGPT, you might be specifying saying, "Hey, look, I want a computer that will work the best for me if I want to play these sorts of games, or I want to do
Exactly. Yeah.
this and these tasks." And you're able to be more colloquial and you're with the follow-ups. And I think that conditioning by default, I think that because that's how Google has always been. Like there hasn't been a
Yeah.
time where people would have looked for things or used Google search differently in terms of what they've been inputting. And with ChatGPT, it's exactly the same as when it was first launched. That's how people were using it. So do you
Yeah.
think that that plays a significant part, and B, if that's the case, what's it going to take for consumer behavior and the way people are using Google so from now sort of into the future, what's it going to take to be able to make people sort of adapt into that way of inputting within search and being more colloquial to probably get more personalized types of results?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly what I kind of was kind of meaning when I said that it would have to look completely different for the behavior to be different, and for actually consumers and everybody to start using Google search similarly to how they are using ChatGPT, for example. It would have to be something different. It would have to be within Gemini, or it would have to be a different kind of, like, an AI overview type of thing, something to prompt the discussion and something to do that. But exactly like you said, like, Google has such a huge amount of information about us. Like, they have a lot of the contexts already there, that, for example, when I'm using ChatGPT to build something, or when I'm using it to have a conversation about a topic, like Google has a lot of that information already, so I wouldn't have to prompt it so much if they were actually using it as the background. So I think they have like a better starting point to build that kind of like a conversational search product, if that's a word to use about that. I think they are just kind of fighting right now a losing battle against OpenAI, for example, just with the data and the usage. Like I have transitioned, and I'm a hardcore like search guy. Have always been like I used to. When I went to school, I learned like search operators and how to do all kinds of searches when it wasn't so easy to kind of even do Google searches. And now I'm doing a lot of the stuff that I would normally Google. I'm using ChatGPT, and I'm actually using the voice one, which is like a game changer for me. And that's also something like 5-6 years ago, like voice search was like a big thing. Like everybody was talking about when Alexa came out a little bit earlier. Like everybody was talking like voice search is going to be this. Everybody's going to be doing that, and nobody's going to be searching. And it was basically like a shittier version of doing a Google search on your own. Sorry for my French. But now it's kind of like the way I can have like a search discussion or discuss a topic with the ChatGPT voice, for example, it's like a game changer because it's a natural conversation. I can give it context. I can interrupt it when it gets something wrong, like it starts to give me a result that I don't like think is correct. I can interrupt it and I can have like an actual conversation. So it's such a different way that right now how Google search it can't compete with that type of need that I have with that.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point about the voice search. Whereas the reason I think why it bombed, even though loads of people were talking about it, saying it's going to be the next big thing, is because that fundamentally still utilized a lot of the same ways that results were being shown and the data was being processed. So it's almost like
Yeah.
even today, if you make a really long-winded type of search on Google, it's probably not going to give you exactly what you want. And I guess that was maybe the expectation that people have had at the time versus the reality that actually it's just not good. Whereas now you can do that on ChatGPT and it's actually good because it is built for those more colloquial types of searches. So that I think that's a really good point that you make there. And then the way that I'm kind of trying to think about this is, and this might be the best way for us to sort of try and like put everything together with this episode, is what's the kind of end game going to look like? What do you envision search personalization being in? I don't know if it's going to be in the next few months, in the next year, in 5 years, 10 years, but what do you think the end game will be in terms of what you would like to see from personalization aspects for search just as a medium?
Yeah, I would want it to actually be personal. I think that's kind of the thing that I put in my post as well, that it actually can utilize the full context of the information that I'm giving, whatever, like especially nowadays, because privacy is one kind of big thing when it comes to these kind of tools. It's like, who do we give our data to? And we have been trusting Google. They have been quite good at keeping our kind of data, being kind of the shepherds of our data compared to some of the others. But it's really about that it's actually using all the information. Like I'm the type of person that if I would trust a platform, I would give it everything. Access to my calendar, access to my emails, access to my personal messages. I might be kind of an outlier in that, but if that would mean that I would get like a super personal, super kind of individual, uh, basically like an assistant, like how I feel ChatGPT for me right now, and some of the other tools, but especially ChatGPT is like it feels like having like an assistant. I use this kind of metaphor or this kind of picture quite often. Like I do a lot of my thinking and writing and going through, for example, like research materials. I do it in the car when I'm driving my kid to daycare, and especially when I'm driving home without him. For example, like I might go through like a research paper with ChatGPT. So I upload it, and then we're having a discussion about it. Then I'm making notes, all with voice, and then it has all of that information. The next time I'm researching something, like I can pull up like, hey, this is actually the thing that Gardner mentioned in this thing that we were looking at last week. Like that kind of personalization. So there's actually the kind of context context there. And then I want control. That's the other thing. I want to be able to say that, okay, these parts are important and this is the thing, this is the kind of output that I'm looking for. And then I want to exclude these kind of things. And of course, right now it's advertiser free, like ChatGPT, which is a big thing for me. And it's kind of like the duality of being a digital marketing guy is like, I love doing ads. I don't really love getting ads. I love getting good ads, but kind of the other side of that. But right now it's kind of advertiser free. So I think there is this kind of, I don't know what word to put it, but there's this kind of like purity. It's a big word to put on that, but it's kind of like pure responses, pure kind of that. So it's not like, hey, like if I'm talking about good meals and it's like, hey, go to Pizza Hut, like there's no kind of like advertiser kind of input in between those responses. So I want it to be really kind of personal. I want to have control over that. I think those are the big things. And that's why I'm leaning more and more for the AI kind of AI as my go-to search tool right now.
Hmm. No, 100%. I would think about it in a similar way. And I think to your first point about the data, giving away all the data. I mean, pretty much we've done that whenever you click sort of confirm or agree in any terms and conditions. Like if you actually read through and see how much data you're actually giving to people, like you would be surprised, right? So I think on that
Yeah.
front, we're kind of all quite guilty of doing that anyway. So I don't really think there's going to be anything too different or drastic in terms of what else we're giving away that people or tech companies don't already have. And I
Yeah.
think to the other point as well about the lack of ads at the moment, I think that's a huge thing. I think that also increases confidence really in terms of how people sort of trust what they're getting. Because, imagine it was the case where every 2, 3 prompts you create, you hear an ad or you have to see something like that would be really frustrating. But obviously,
Yeah.
the way that we're seeing this at the moment, like we're seeing this how it is today. Maybe this is going to be different in the future. Who knows how OpenAI, for example, may want to further monetize ChatGPT search, for example. We don't know that as of yet. So it's more just hope it's kind of one of those things where you hope that it will sort of either stay like that in that sense and then still improve as an actual solution for our problems and for what we're using it for. But again, we don't really have any idea. So I guess to sort of sum it up in that sense, who knows what the hell is going to happen with search
Yeah.
personalization, but it seems to be moving in the right direction, which I think is an important thing to understand, and it's a massive step up from and I come back to that voice search example you gave because I think that's a brilliant example of seeing just how far search has kind of gone from the times when people were saying voice search is finally here. Well, now it seems like voice search, at least from a chat GPT or an LM perspective, is finally here. And I think that
Yeah.
this is like a really interesting shift also in terms of user behavior and all the stuff that we talked about there. But there is so much to talk about. We could talk about this for hours, honestly. Otso, if people have any questions and want to sort of pick your brain a bit about the kind of patterns you've looked into and all this other stuff to do with search personalization, how can they find you?
You can put my name into LinkedIn. That would be the perfect place. And don't hesitate to send me a message. I love having conversations. I'm super active on LinkedIn, so that's kind of the main place where to find me. Don't email me or don't call me. That's kind of I'm that kind of a millennial, so please don't. But LinkedIn direct messages are okay.
Brilliant. Awesome. Well, Otto, thank you very much for your time. It was a really interesting conversation today. And also thanks to everyone listening at home or wherever you are. And as always, we will see you in the next episode. Hey, you've reached the end of this video, but don't worry, there's plenty more great content that you can watch right now. All you have to do is click one of the 2 video links on the left side of the screen. And also, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to never miss out on future uploads.